Hey everybody, and welcome to this deep dive, into
Oh, yeah.
Elie Wiesel's memoir about his experiences in the Nazi concentration camps.
Yeah.
I find it just fascinating that it's such a heavy topic.
Yeah.
But it's less than 150 pages.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's fascinating, too, how much he manages to pack into
Yeah.
such a short work.
Mm-hmm.
Every sentence is just so impactful. It's really like a masterclass in minimalist storytelling. And that's something that we'll definitely see as we go through this.
Okay, cool. So night begins in 1941 in Site, Transylvania, which is modern-day Romania.
Right.
And we're introduced to Eliezer, a young, devout Jewish teenager, just completely engrossed in his religious studies.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like his life is really normal, even idyllic at this point.
Yeah, he really paints a picture of just this peaceful existence, this tight-knit community where religious life plays such a central role. And it's so interesting because this early part of the book serves as a stark contrast to the horrors that follow. And it really emphasizes this abrupt and devastating loss of innocence that Eliezer and so many others experience.
Yeah, which makes that shift in 1944 all the more jarring, right?
Absolutely.
Because suddenly the Nazis arrive and shatter that peaceful life.
Yeah.
And it's just chilling how quickly things escalate.
Yeah.
Anti-Jewish laws, the Yellow Star, curfews, all these freedoms are just stripped away one by one.
That meticulous stripping away of rights is something that Wiesel does so well.
Yeah.
And I think for students of literature, it's really worth paying attention to how he builds tension and suspense. Because he doesn't just jump into the horrific parts. He really makes you feel that slow, suffocating grip of fear and oppression.
Yeah. And then the ultimate horror deportation. Families are just ripped from their homes, herded onto cattle wagons, packed in like animals.
Right.
I mean, it's hard to even imagine the terror and the confusion of that moment.
It's interesting because the journey itself almost becomes a symbol of dehumanization. You have these individuals, once vibrant members of their community. They're reduced to cargo. Their lives are completely in the hands of their oppressors.
Yeah.
And it's such a brutal foreshadowing of what awaits them.
And then arrival at Auschwitz.
Yeah.
And the dehumanization just becomes even more intense and brutal.
Yeah.
Families are torn apart. They're literally sorted into lines based on their perceived usefulness. Can you imagine the emotional trauma?
That's just devastating, isn't it?
Not knowing if you'll ever see your loved ones again.
It's such a pivotal moment in the book, narratively and thematically. It marks the complete destruction of Eliezer's world, the loss of everything familiar to him.
Yeah.
He's stripped of his identity, his family, his very humanity.
Right.
And from this point on, the book just focuses on this struggle for survival, physical and spiritual.
And it's in this chaotic and terrifying setting that Wiesel gives us one of the most heartbreaking scenes.
Yes.
The separation from his mother and younger sister. He describes his mother stroking his sister's hair as they're led away.
Wow.
And just knowing what awaits them.
Yeah.
It makes that image all the more gut-wrenching.
It really does.
Yeah.
I think Wiesel's use of simple and direct language in these moments is incredibly effective because there's no melodrama, there's no embellishment.
Right.
It's just the starkness of the prose that makes it so powerful, and he just lets the events speak for themselves.
Yeah.
And that allows the reader to really experience that raw emotion without feeling manipulated.
And it's not just the physical separation that's devastating, but the psychological impact of witnessing those atrocities, especially the deaths of children.
Right.
Eliezer's faith, which had been such a core part of his identity, just starts to crumble. He questions how a benevolent God could allow such suffering.
This questioning of faith is such a recurring theme in Night.
Yeah.
And it's something that really makes it resonate with readers of all backgrounds because it explores that existential crisis that arises when confronted with this unimaginable evil.
Right.
How do we make sense of suffering?
Right.
How do we hold on to hope in the face of despair?
So we have this backdrop of just unimaginable suffering and loss.
Yeah.
But then Wiesel also dives into those complex relationships that are strained under such duress.
Yeah.
It's not just about surviving the physical hardships, but also the emotional and moral dilemmas that arise.
Exactly. And I think the most compelling example of this is the relationship between Eliezer and his father, Colombo.
Yeah.
As Colombo weakens their roles, gradually reverse, Eliezer has to become his caregiver, his protector.
Right.
Even as he is battling his own desperate need to survive.
Right. And it creates this agonizing conflict for Eliezer because he loves his father, but in this brutal environment,
Yeah.
Caring for someone else can mean sacrificing your own chance of survival.
Right.
It raises those tough questions about, the limits of love and loyalty in the face of such unimaginable suffering.
And for students of literature, this dynamic is so rich with symbolism. This father-son relationship becomes like this microcosm of the larger human struggle.
Yeah.
It forces us to confront our own capacity for compassion and self-preservation when faced with these impossible choices.
Then as the war is nearing its end, we have the death marches.
Oh, yeah.
Can you imagine being forced to march for miles in freezing conditions?
Yeah.
Starving, exhausted with death all around you.
Yeah.
Wiesel does not hold back on those details at all.
No, he doesn't.
And it makes the reader really feel the sheer brutality of it all.
And the way he describes that physical and emotional exhaustion,
Yeah.
it's so visceral. It's not just the pain.
Right.
It's the dehumanization, the feeling of being reduced to just a mere body barely clinging to life.
And amidst all this dehumanization, there's still these glimmers of humanity that shine through.
Absolutely.
Like the story of Rabbi Eliyahu desperately searching for his son in the snow during the march.
Yep.
Just breaks your heart, seeing this man clinging to hope
Right.
in the midst of such despair.
And that's one of the things that makes Night so powerful.
Yeah.
It doesn't shy away from the darkness, but it also shows us
Right.
the resilience of the human spirit.
Yeah.
Rabbi Eliyahu's search for his son becomes symbolic of that enduring power of love and faith, even in the darkest of times.
But as the conditions worsen, Eliezer's inner conflict intensifies.
Yeah.
He talks about feeling ashamed, grappling with the guilt of prioritizing his own survival over his father's well-being. It's just a raw and honest look at the moral compromises that we can be forced to make when we're pushed to our limits.
Wiesel's willingness to explore these morally ambiguous areas is
Yeah.
something that makes Night such a challenging and thought-provoking work.
Yeah.
He doesn't offer easy answers or try to sugarcoat those complexities of human experience under such extreme circumstances.
And then comes Buchenwald, the final destination for Eliezer and his father. And it feels like the culmination of all their suffering,
Right.
both physical and emotional.
It is, and it's in Buchenwald that we see the complete unraveling of their relationship.
Right.
Clomo is just weakened by dysentery, which is a severe intestinal infection.
Right.
He's also been brutally beaten, and he's barely clinging to life.
Yeah.
And the scenes describing his final days are some of the most difficult to read in the entire book.
Wiesel's description of his father begging for water,
I know.
only to be beaten for making noise, is just gut-wrenching. And Eliezer lies in the bunk above,
Right.
paralyzed by fear, unable to help.
It's awful.
It shows how the camps just broke people.
Yeah.
Not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually as well.
It's a testament to Wiesel's commitment to telling the truth.
Yeah.
Even when it's painful. He doesn't shy away from those moments of weakness, those instances where even the strongest bonds of love are strained to the breaking point.
And in a cruel twist of fate, Clomo dies just months before the camp is liberated. It's almost unbearable to think about freedom being so close, yet so far out of reach.
The death of Clomo is such a pivotal moment.
Yeah.
Not just in the story, but also in Eliezer's journey.
Right.
It represents that complete destruction of his world, the loss of his last remaining family member, and it leaves him utterly alone, facing an uncertain future.
There's this chilling line that sticks with me after Clomo's death. Free at last.
Oh, yeah.
And it's such a loaded phrase, because on one hand, it's obviously referring to his father's release from suffering.
Right.
But it also speaks to that complex psychological impact of trauma. After enduring such prolonged suffering, Eliezer experiences this strange sense of relief.
Right.
It's not about celebrating the loss, but rather acknowledging the crushing weight of responsibility that has been lifted. It's such a difficult concept to grasp, but Wiesel captures it.
He does.
With such honesty and rawness.
And then comes the liberation of Buchenwald in April 1945.
Yeah.
American forces arrive, and the prisoners are finally free. But for Eliezer, it's not this moment of pure joy or triumph that you might expect.
No, and that's what makes the ending of Night so powerful and thought-provoking.
Right.
It doesn't offer easy answers or neat resolutions. Instead, it leaves the reader with this haunting image. Eliezer gazing into a mirror and seeing only a corpse staring back at him.
That image is just such a powerful metaphor for the lasting psychological scars of trauma.
Right.
The physical liberation may have come, but that internal struggle continues.
Mhm.
And it really makes you think about that long and difficult journey to healing
Yeah.
so many survivors faced.
And what's remarkable is that Knight achieves all of this in such a concise way.
Absolutely.
It's not a long book, but every word carries weight.
Yes.
And I think for students of literature,
Mm-hmm.
it's such a great example of how powerful